Hey, this is Tom from MVP Chess, and in this video, we're going to analyze games from the recently concluded MVP Chess Scholastic Championship. Analyzing your tournament games is one of the best ways to improve, and I'm happy to analyze the four games that young Laksha from Maryland played en route to winning the tournament with a perfect 4 out of 4, doing his best Bobby Fischer impersonation. So, in the first round, Laksha was playing black. His opponent, Andrew, was playing white. This was Andrew's first US chess tournament. And he opened with pawn to e4, best by test, of course. e5, bishop c4, the bishop's opening, can transpose into the Italian. Knight f6, knight c3, bishop c5. And in this position, Andrew decides to play knight d5. So moving the same piece more than once in the opening is generally frowned upon, mainly because it neglects the development of your other pieces, in particular this knight, this bishop, the safety of your king as well. So instead of bringing the knight to c3, I think the most prudent move would be knight to f3 in this position. And we don't need to worry about any pressure here. First of all, white could play d4, and white also has the option of castling, and this is insufficient compensation for black. So after knight d5, we have knight takes d5, bishop takes d5, and castle. So black has done a very good job of castling the king quickly, controlling the center, and he's going to look to develop his pieces actively. Pawn to d3, good move. Not only securing the e4 pawn, but opening this diagonal for the bishop to develop into the game. We have d6, and then bishop d2. Okay, so generally speaking, in the opening, we want to develop our king side first, especially our knights before our bishops, and then castle our king. We don't quite know just yet where this bishop belongs. Okay, for example, if black ends up developing the knight to f6 via d7, maybe we want to bring the bishop out to g5 in one move. The moves we definitely know that we want to play in this position as white is knight to f6, and let's say black continues with that plan, and castle. And here, we can see that white has saved very important tempo. Instead of the bishop coming to a passive square in d2, it has now come out to g5 and pinned the knight. For example, bishop d2, knight d7, good development by black, and then we have bishop c3. Okay, moving this piece again. White should be playing knight f3 and getting the king to safety. And after queen f6, this is where black began to take the initiative. Okay, black by this point has already equalized. That's always black's first goal in the opening, is to equalize white's advantage of the first move. Black's already done that. After white's next move, I think black has an advantage. Now, white is undoubtedly worried, as well he should be, about queen takes f2 checkmate. So I will turn it over to you in this position. White to play. What's the best way to defend this threat of mate in one on f2? Pause your videos. Okay, congratulations if you met this threat with knight to f3. Great move, development and defense in one move. Of course, this blocks the queen's access to the f2 square, and now white will be able to castle safely on the next turn. Instead, white played f3 in this position. So good job identifying the threat of mate, but not only does this deprive the knight of its most active square on f3, it starts weakening all of these dark squares around white's king. Okay, notice white's dark square bishop rather is all the way on c3. So white's going to really have to mind the weak dark squares around the king now. Black tries to take advantage of that right away with queen f4. And here we have the bishop moving for the third time, bishop d2, queen h4, g3, and then black decides just to bring the queen all the way back to d8. I don't know if that was the most active move, but I think this queen sortie that we had has done a lot of damage to white's position. Provoked the moves f3, provoked the move g3, really weakening the potential castle position of the king. Notice the king can't even really castle in this position because of this active bishop, and white is lagging behind in development. Pawn to f4 in this position. We definitely don't want to make a pawn break such as this when our king is in the center of the board and we're still behind in development. Why? Because this allows our opponent to open the position and open lines towards our king. So in this position, I think the most prudent move would actually be queen to e2 with the idea of castling to the queen side. We've got to secure the king before we take any active measures in the center of the board. And then maybe we can make use of these advanced pawns on the king side by going for some sort of pawn storm against the black king. I think that's the best plan for white. But we have f4, capture here, and white decided to move the bishop again to c3. I think white was concerned about capturing here and letting the queen in here for good reason. King moves here, and that is mate on the board. So he decided to bring the bishop to c3, but this allows black to win a clean pawn and really open up the king side. Queen g4, okay. Black needs to be on alert too. White has just threatened queen takes g7, mate in 1. Okay. Which black defends with pawn to g6, but notice this has provoked a pawn weakness of the dark squares around black's king too. So even though this bishop on c3 has moved too many times in the opening, it is now on a wonderful diagonal, and maybe white can get some attacking chances going with this. Queen to f4, pawn to g2. Fortunately, and this is what happens when you don't develop, this rook has no available squares and is unfortunately going to be lost. But first, black needs to deal with the threats on the king side. Okay, so we have a threat of mate in 1 on g7. Notice this pawn on f7 is pinned, so you can't play the move pawn to f6. That's why black decided to play knight to f6, bringing the knight towards the center, securing the king side, and shutting down this dark square diagonal here. e5, good move by white. Now, white by this point is losing. The rook in the corner is lost. The king's still stuck in the center. But I think, given the circumstances, trying to open up the center of the board and just get something going is probably the best course of action. Fortunately, this does lose a piece to knight takes d5. And I think white's idea was maybe to push on with e6 or maybe even take here and reopen this diagonal. But unfortunately, after e6, which was played in the game, white loses this potent dark square bishop on c3. White throws in this in-between move with check. Rook takes f7. Knight f3. The knight finally develops into the game, but at this point, it's too late. Black finally captures on h1, promotes to a queen, and after king d2, queen takes a1. I think white played on for a few more moves in this game, but this is a fine position in which to resign. So, important lesson from this game, make sure you control the center, develop your pieces, and castle your king. Very important. Don't make too many moves in the opening with the same piece because it neglects your development. And when you neglect your development, your king gets stuck in the center. And when your king's in the center, that's when you get attacked. So that's exactly what happened in this game. Great game by both players. So in the next game, we have Laksha playing white this time against Avik. So this was also Avik's first tournament, and he did really, really well. Came in second place, so congratulations to him. And like many Scholastic games, we have an E4, E5 opening. It's a great way to start at this level. You're playing classical chess. I really don't like when young, improving players play openings like the Caro Kann, even though they're in vogue and very popular on YouTube and on Blitz Chess on chess.com. You need to play openings that control the center from move one. So the only moves I would recommend to my students are either E5, the King's Pawn opening, or C5, the Sicilian, where you're fighting for control over the center on move one. E5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4. So we have the Italian game, knight f6, the two knights. So by far, white's most challenging try in this position is to play knight g5, okay, and go after this weakness on f7. Black needs to give up a pawn. Okay, so we have a variation like this, where black has given up a pawn, but does get compensation in terms of good control over the center, rapid development. So that's definitely the most testing variation in this line. Instead, we have the so-called Italian four knights. Now, black played a very solid developing move, bishop c5, nothing wrong with that. The Italian four knights, though, has kind of a fatal flaw in it, in that it allows black to immediately equalize by employing the center fork trick. Black can play knight takes, and after knight takes, play d5 and recapture the piece. So black gets very free development, good control over the center, easy equality. Okay, that's why instead of knight c3, I really recommend my students to defend this pawn if they're not going to play knight g5 with d3, and then look to play c3 and d4, just like you would in the Ruy Lopez. And this knight will actually find a home all the way on the king side and maybe land on f5 as an attacking piece. So important idea to keep in mind. But bishop c5, nothing wrong with that move. d3, castles, bishop g5. And here was a pretty critical moment in the game. Black played d6. Now this looks like a good move because we've already been talking about actively developing your pieces being such an important part of the opening. d6 allows this bishop to come to the game. But we've got this really annoying pin on the knight here, okay? And we would like to, in a pinch, be able to drop this bishop down to e7 to break this pin, okay? So I've studied, I play this line myself with black. The latest Grandmaster theory says h6 is called for, and if white maintains the pin, just to bring this bishop back to e7, play d6, and you've got like a very solid position. But when you play d6, now you no longer have that option because the pawn is preventing that from happening. And now white is able to put more pressure on the pin piece immediately with knight d5. Okay, so really good decision by white here, delaying castling for a move. Okay, castling would have given white the opportunity to maybe play bishop e6, to play h6, and try to address this threat. Knight d5 jumping in right away is the way to go. And now white is going to force some sort of critical weakening of black's king side. After knight d4, we have captures, and then here we go, knight takes f6. Pawn is forced to recaptured, and then we have bishop h6. Yikes. This is really a tough position for black. White has a very primitive threat of just bringing the queen in and delivering mate. If black manages to prevent that, white's king is going to find safety on the queen side, and he's going to have a really strong attack on the king side because of this compromised kingside structure. Okay. Now, after rook e8 and queen f3, black missed the forced mate here and unfortunately lost in 13 moves. Okay, black played rook e7, and after queen g3, there's nothing black can do to prevent the mate. You can go like computer mode and just start throwing pieces in between, but it won't prevent mate on g7. So coming back to this position, I actually noticed over the board that black might have a pretty decent try to prevent the mate in this position. I'm wondering if you can find it. Black to move, what's black's best chance to prolong the game? Okay, I was thinking that black's best move in this position would be queen d7. Okay, so that if white goes on autopilot with this idea, queen g3, as in the game, black could contest the g file with queen g4 and get the queen in a defensive role, okay? Of course, white is still doing really, really well in this position, but that would have been a way for black to prolong the game and maybe prevent a direct mate. As is, we had rook e7, and white finished it off very nicely with queen g7. So, good development by black in this game, controlling the center, developing the pieces, but of course, we have to mind our opponent's threats, and that threat on the f6 square was really, really big, and white did a good job of taking advantage of that immediately with knight d5, compromising the kingside structure, and then getting the queen into a attacking position very quickly. So very nice. You know, we've heard of a rook lift. This is kind of a queen lift, right? Queen just takes the elevator right to the kiss of death mate on g7. Okay. Let's look at the next game. In this game, we have another new U.S. chess member who played very well in his first tournament, Charlie, coming in third place. He's playing white. Laksha is playing black. To me, I thought this was the game of the tournament. Very hard-fought game by both players. Both players had chances to win. And it ended in a really instructive end game, which unfortunately we don't have notated, but I'll just kind of fill in the details at the end. So again, we have e4, e5. Good job by both players playing classical openings. Knight of3, knight c6, and we have a rare appearance in Scholastic Chess, okay? Normally 99% of the games are bishop c4, the Italian. But here we have d4, which is the Scotch game. Not sure if Charlie knew this opening or not, or had studied it at all, but d4 is a good move. It's very combative. Black did the correct thing here, capturing, and after knight takes, the best move, in my opinion, for black in this position is knight to f6, and you can get funky positions like this where you have all these different pins and tricks. This is kind of the main line of the Scotch game, and black is going to look to fianchetto, white is going to look to do the same like this, and if they follow theory, we'll actually end up in an end game where one side has the two minors versus the rook. But that's neither here nor there. Instead, we have queen f6 attacking the knight, and white defended with c3. Okay, so good job noticing that threat against the knight on d4 and just reinforcing it. Other thing white could do, which is very common for white to do in the Scotch, is just to capture here. Just to not lose time, bring the bishop to d3, get yourself castled. But we have bishop c5, attacking the knight again. So we have bishop e3. So I thought this was really good positional chess by both players in that they both understand the importance of the d4 square in this position. And I also thought it was really good by Charlie in his first tournament to recognize that he has a piece in the center of the board that's well posted, and he's looking to maintain the tension. Okay, he didn't just capture it off or retreat it. Okay, he's trying to preserve that knight, and it actually paid off for him in a big way in this position. Provoked black into playing knight takes d4. Now, I'll throw it over to you in this position. How should white recapture here? White to play. What's the best move? So black released the tension in the center too soon. And congratulations if you decided to recapture with the pawn. That is definitely the best move. Wow. Look at this center that white has managed to develop. This central pawn duo controls so many important squares. White has a clear advantage here. Also gaining a tempo against the bishop, it has to move. If we have bishop b4, white can just simply block that check with development, develop the bishop, castle the king. Phenomenal position, okay? Instead, white decided to capture with the bishop, okay, which controls less of the center. And black decided to capture here, but we see the key difference is that white's not winning a tempo against his bishop. Okay, instead, black now has a free hand to make a move here and made kind of an annoying move, queen b6, which white felt compelled to defend the b2 pawn with b3, knight f6, and here's an instructive moment, I think, for both players. White decided to push forward with e5 here, but when you push a pawn in chess, you always leave weaknesses behind, okay? And the weakness that this pawn push left behind was the d5 square. So the knight is able to find a relatively good square in the center of the board, okay? This pawn's under attack, so we need to defend it. Okay, bishop d3 wouldn't be advised because that would hang the d4 pawn. So I think in this position, knight to c3 could have been a good continuation for white. Okay, maintaining this pawn duo side by side and looking just to complete development. But instead we have e5. Gaining space, this is not a bad move. White still has an advantage. Knight d5, bishop c4, attacking the knight. Queen b4, knight d2, and knight b6. So the knight's been pushed over to the corner of the board, and white decides to kick the queen away with a3, queen e7, and castle. So white has come out of the opening with a clear advantage, great position. Notice if black ever decides to capture this bishop, white can recapture with the pawn and build just an absolutely massive pawn center. Okay, this is a decisive positional advantage for strong tournament players. I mean, this is just the end of the road for black. At the scholastic level, not so much, but I think black would have a very hard time equalizing in this position. So knight takes c4. Castles by both sides. Great job by both players castling their king. Really good job with their king safety. Here's a crafty move by white. Rook a2. Nice rook lift. Maybe the rook could come into d2 to e2 to c2. A lot of flexibility for this rook on the second rank. I thought that was a really good move. b5, attacking the knight, but the knight has plenty of active squares to move to, except the one that it went to in the game. Knight a5. Okay, now, ultimately, this move worked out really well for white in the game, but there's a saying in chess, if you don't know it, you should. Knights on the rim are dim or grim. That's because their activity is severely limited, right? Notice this knight only has influence over 4 squares on the chessboard. The other 4 are on the Z file. They're off the chessboard. Okay, that's why we want our knights centralized, where they're most active, most effective. So after b5, white's got a couple good options. Knight e3, maybe looking to post the knight on f5 or d5. That looks really good. Another possibility is maybe just bringing the knight here and centralizing it this way. White's got a lot of good options with the knight, but we don't want to put it on the rim. Bishop a6. Okay, looking to develop the bishop and connect the rooks. The one nice thing that the knight does is that it controls the b7 square. So, you know, in order to complete development, black kind of has to bring the bishop here or play d6. Queen to e2. Now, I wouldn't advise bringing your queen voluntarily opposite a potential discovered attack like this. But right now, this bishop's undefended, and maybe that affords white some tactical opportunities, like playing the move a4. We have d6. Here comes a4. Good move. Rook a b8. But this runs into a nice fork by Charlie, who now has, after knight c6, a winning advantage in the game. But after the queen moves and white wins the exchange, which means he won a rook for a minor piece, white still got a lot of work to do. You know, it's not like white has an attack that's going to play by itself on the king side and it's mate in two. You know, white's going to have to control black's counterplay, consolidate his position, look to advance his pawns and promote him, activate his rooks. So he's got a lot of work to do. But right now, we can definitely say that white has a winning position. h3, I really like that move h3, okay? White's position is so strong here. Let's just play h3 and make luft for the king. Now we don't have to worry about any back rank mates. Just gives the king some breathing room. Really good move. D takes, and here's where white started to lose the thread a little bit and black got back into the game. Okay. White should definitely recapture this pawn. That is the best move, according to my eyes. And by the way, I analyze all these games without the use of an engine. That's the best way to improve. So if I miss some small details, that's why. But here I would definitely just recapture, most likely with the pawn, because it's going to open some key files for our rooks where maybe we can look to attack and exploit this back rank, and also the position of the queen on this open d file. Okay, but instead we have rook e1. I think white's idea was that maybe there was going to be some sort of back rank checkmate, but black actually really has this under control. Black's got really good control over the e8 square. So now white still has an advantage, but not as much. Black's clawing back into the game. A takes b5 and bishop takes b5. So this does open the a file for the rook, but notice the bishop now has quite a lot of scope and has become an active piece. And black did a really good job in this game, as we'll see over the next few moves. It's really hard to say. Coordinating his queen and bishop to attack the white king. Queen e4, rook e8. So because white's rooks are split, okay, I remember during the game Charlie picking up this queen and legally not taking his hand off, putting it over and hovering it over a few squares until he eventually found the move rook b1. Yeah, he's got to come back with the queen that's under attack and make sure he keeps his rook defended. So queen b1 was a good move, but unfortunately it's a pretty passive move for white to have to make, because after this capture, d3, now black has this really strong passed pawn in the center of the board. I would say at this point now black has full compensation for the exchange in the form of this strong passed pawn on d3, and also after queen d5 and bishop c6, really well coordinated pieces, especially in attack, which provokes white into playing a move he doesn't really want to make, which is pawn to f3. It's a difficult position, and this is a real danger of passed pawns sometimes, especially in the late middle game, early end game. You can use these passed pawns as a diversion to start a kingside attack, or vice versa. These are two weaknesses that are very difficult for white to defend simultaneously. So after f3, black's able to win another pawn. Now black is, I think, for choice in this position. I mean, white always has some drawing chances, of course, with the queen and rook, maybe some sort of perpetual, but black's got 3 pass pawns on the queen side, a really nice bishop, and white's really lacking counterplay. After rook c1 and bishop d7, that's where the notation ends. Eventually, white's rook and queen became disconnected, and black was able to win it with a nice double attack against the king and rook. So there was a nice fork by the queen to win the rook. The game ended by checkmate, queen and king versus lone king. Charlie fought to the bitter end. He came up with some creative ways to try to force his opponent to stalemate, but black was up to the task, left the king some breathing room, and delivered a nice checkmate. Queen and king versus lone king. Excellent game by both players. That to me was the game of the tournament. Now, in the last and final round, we had a rematch between Avik now playing white and Laksha playing black. If Laksha won this game, he would win clear first with a perfect score. If Avik won, they would both finish on 3 points, and then we would have won to tiebreakers. So it was nice to see a decisive game in this round. So once again, we have e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, knight f6, and now, as mentioned in the previous round, Avik played the critical move knight g5. He won for it. Really good move. We have pawn to d5, so correct response by black. We have the capture, and now, instead of playing knight a5, which is Coach Tom's approved move, black went for the absolutely mental fried liver variation. Now, this is not to be recommended. White scores an astronomical score in this position after knight takes f7. King takes f7, and queen f3. I'll leave it for you to figure out the details there, but I wouldn't want to touch this position with a 10-foot pole with black. Stay away from it, okay? But after knight takes d5, unfortunately, white missed the critical continuation knight takes f7 and played knight c3. And this just allowed black to win a piece on g5. So unfortunate mistake there with opening theory. It's very common, especially in your first chess tournament, to make a mistake like this, especially in a sharp position. So unfortunately, over the course of a few moves, white went from a very promising attacking position to a position that now is objectively losing, being down a piece and behind in development. So we have d3 attacking the queen, but the g2 pawn is sensitive. Queen takes g2, rook f1. Okay, the rook is on the square it's supposed to be. The problem is that the king is not in a castled position. The king is on e1 and is in mortal danger, just stuck in the center of the board. And black did a really good job coordinating his pieces for attack. Bishop h3, bringing the bishop in with gain of tempo. We have queen e2 trying to defend. Now, excuse me, a really easy way for black to win this position is just to take the exchange and play this position. It's a totally winning endgame. But white played for more. Okay, I think this was a good decision, and definitely the best attacking one. Black avoids the exchange of queens, even though he's winning an exchange, because white's king is just so unsafe and he wants to attack. So rook h1, bishop c5, the bishop comes to a very active diagonal. Bishop b5, okay, misfire there. Unfortunately, again, we have the same piece moving more than once in the opening. White really needs to try to get this bishop developed and try to find some safety for the king on the queen side at all costs. Bishop e5, though. White's falling further behind in development. Takes. So white gives up the light square bishop. The queen takes laterally and attacks the rook in the corner. Okay, so white has lost some time there with that maneuver. But after rook g1, I thought white did a really good job in this game of utilizing the open g file and coming up with the best attacking chances that he could. Okay, so I thought that was really, really good dynamic play by white, making the most of his position. Centralizing the rooks, yikes. This rook comes to a really menacing position. Okay, especially maybe e4's on the cards opposite the queen and the king. Ugh. This is a disaster waiting to happen on the e-file. Bishop d2. Okay, good job finishing development, hopefully getting this king to safety. But black plays a power move in this position. e4. Great move, opening the center. d4. White does the correct thing, trying to keep things closed. Bishop d6. Queen e3, attacking the bishop on h3, which just retreats to d7. And we have queen g5. So in this position, white is threatening mate in one move. So black has to defend with g6. So that's why I was saying before, I thought white did a really good job of using this open g file and coming up with the best dynamic attacking chances that he had in the position. Who knows? Maybe you could use Harry the H-pawn here as a battering ram to try to open up the position and maybe play for a perpetual or something like that. Rook d1. Okay. Bringing the rook into the game, and I understand why this is played, because you castle to the queen side. Are you really that safe? No. Because the b pawn has been dragged to the c file, it would be a very reminiscent checkmate of their first encounter in round 1, where the g file got opened because of a capture on f6, and we had this kiss of death checkmate. Here it would happen like this. So yeah, the king's in the center of the board. Bishop takes h2, rook h1, bishop d6. So tip for black here, black is already winning every which way. I would not recommend grabbing a pawn here and opening the h-file towards my own king. Okay, sometimes your opponent's own pieces can be working against them, and I think that's the situation here. White would love to just get this h-pawn off the board to just try to get some sort of attacking chances on the king. And playing bishop takes h2, rook h1 helps white do that after queen h6. Okay. You know, we've got some counterplay here for white. But black was very well composed, played bishop g4. I really like this move because he recognized that even though the queen is coming in, he's got a nice escape route for his king via e7. That was really good calculation by black. And this is where the notation stopped. Clearly winning position for black. So with that, Lakshya won the tournament with a perfect score, 4-0. Congratulations to him. Congratulations to all the participants. We had a great time, and if you're in the DMV area, we're definitely going to have more events in the future. So be sure to check out mvpchess.org for all the details. Thanks so much for watching. If you're not a member of Team MVP already, what's the matter with you? Smash that subscribe button. Join Team MVP. Really appreciate the support. I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.